Welcome to Executive Leaders Radio, your spot in the corner office, the radio show where executives share their secrets to success. Executive Leaders Radio.
You're listening to Executive Leaders Radio. This is your host, Herb Cohen. And I'd like to introduce my co-hosts, including Jeff Mack and Shannon Lane, Newmark Knight Frank, Drew Hanlon, Pat Riley, USI, Matthew Shapiro, Obermeyer, and Chris Molyneux, Life Sciences, Pennsylvania. Jeff, can you give us a rundown on who we have on the show today, please?
Sure, Herb, and I'd first like to thank Chris Molyneux for hosting us at Life Sciences PA today. We have Andrew Reaume as the CEO of Melior Discoveries. John Witkowski is the president of DSM Biomedical. Jeff Aronin is the founder, chairman, and CEO of Paragon Biosciences. And Craig Fraser, president and CEO, Windtree Therapeutics.
Let's get to know our first guest, Andrew Reaume, CEO of Melior Discoveries. Andrew, what is Melior Discoveries? What are you guys doing?
Melior finds new uses for existing drugs.
Oh, interesting. Where are you from originally? How many brothers and sisters? Where are you in the pecking order?
I'm from Canada originally, from a small town called Peterborough, Ontario, and I'm the youngest of three, with two older sisters.
Two older sisters, youngest of three. And what was going on with you 8 to 14? What kind of stuff were you up to?
Well, I was a science geek. I was the kid who had the chemistry set. I was into model rockets. But, my summers in those ages, I was working construction by age 13, building swimming pools.
Mm-hmm. Jeffrey?
So, Andrew, in the green room, you were telling us about your dad. He was an entrepreneur, and he had a kind of a unique experience. Tell us about your life growing up with your dad.
Yeah, my father was innovative in the sense that he was the first one in that small town that I lived in to own a backhoe back in the 50s. That was a new technology in those days. And I think, to this day, I sort of bring that sort of, I reflect and am innovative in the business that we build and in the same sort of way.
Yeah, he was the first one to have the backhoe. You're innovating life sciences. Chris?
Yeah, Andrew, your job was building swimming pools as a kid. What do you remember from those days?
I remember at age 13 being intimidated by all the older guys, and it was exhausting work, and it was just it was hard and terrifying in many ways. But it's one of those memories you look back on today with very fond memories. Yeah,
and now you're redeveloping drugs. You think back on those days. What do you remember from those days, building swimming pools versus redeveloping drugs? Do you ever tie those two together?
Yeah, well, without question, it instilled the work ethic and the perseverance that is really essential to bring to something as tough as the drug discovery industry.
Perfect. Drew?
Andrew, what would your older sisters tell us about you?
They'd tell you that I was a science geek and that that I was a hard worker. I looked up to them. I remember when I was young, I looked up to them. They were the cool older sisters. I got my sense of music, that sort of thing from them.
What do you bring to work every day that your sisters taught you?
Sort of that human relations side of things. The sort of family spirit that we have at Melior Discovery. It's really key, and that those human interactions are in part were things that I learned from my sisters.
Matthew?
Yeah, you told us you were a science geek, and in the green room, you said that goes back to like when you were 5 or 6. What did you like about science?
Well, I think I was just born with a natural curiosity. As I said, I mean, I was a kid who had probably a chemistry set at age 5 and so on and so forth. It was just something I was naturally born with.
That natural curiosity? Like, are you still naturally curious? What's that got to do with what you're doing now?
Well, obviously, to finding new drugs and new uses for drugs is really evolves
So are you still playing with the chemistry set, basically?
In some respects, I am, yes.
Shannon?
Andrew, who was someone you looked up to when you were growing up?
So along those lines of being a science geek and so on, I remember one of my heroes was Jacques Cousteau. I was a huge Jacques Cousteau fan. For those who remember who he was, the undersea explorer. And so I had watched all of his movies, his TV shows, his books, read all of his books. So I was really a huge Jacques Cousteau fan.
And what did you learn watching those movies, reading those books that you carry with you today?
So again, I mean, it was that natural curiosity and that interest in biology and science that I brought into this industry and into our business in finding new uses for drugs.
Pat?
Andrew, can you tell us a little bit about your neighborhood growing up?
Yeah, so another big part of my life was the gang, the neighborhood gang that we were very close clique of friends, and I would say I would characterize my role as sort of vying for being, alpha dog. It was sort of a competitive thing, trading places with the other kid next door who was alpha dog, and so it's sort of a competitive spirit, I think, that I bring. It's a kind of thing I could relate to that I bring to work today. That sort of competitive spirit.
That's interesting. You say trading places for that alpha dog role. How does that carry over today to your current company?
Well, as a founder and leader at Melior Discovery, you have to have a sort of alpha dog role, but obviously do it in a way that is productive. And again, I talk about having a sort of a family type spirit in this company is key. So I say alpha dog, but it's a very it really is in a sort of family sense.
Drew?
Yeah, Andrew, you mentioned in the green room that you were a pilot and also like to jump out of planes. What's that tell us about you?
Well, you could say that I have a risk, sort of risk seeking, but I don't look at it that way at all. I would say that I like to manage risk. I don't look at being a pilot as a risky thing. But it's certainly something that we often say that pilot flying isn't necessarily dangerous, is very unforgiving. So there is risk if not managed right. So I think in many things, including starting up a business, it's something that I can take on those challenges, but I'm very comfortable managing those types of risks.
Jeffrey?
Andrew, at Pfizer, in your bio, you conceived ideas and created platforms and were very creative. Did your mom help with that characteristic in you? You mentioned some things about her.
Yeah, my mother had a very strong spirit. She was a very outgoing person. You always knew what she was thinking. She was entrepreneurial like my father. After she finished raising us, she went back to the workforce. So she had work ethic. She was, as I said, she was outgoing. And many people who know me often compare sort of the personality that she's imprinted and see many of her traits in me.
Mm-hmm. So was there a question? Oh, Matthew.
Yeah, I like the balance in you. Tell me if I'm reading this right. You're a skydiving alpha dog competing science geek. Explain that balance to me.
Well, the balance is. I have all those traits. But I guess let me ask you exactly what you mean by the question of balance. I'm not sure.
Well, tell me how we mesh all those things together with the guy who's running companies. Like how does all of that come together to help you out?
Well, so I talked a little bit about how I am very comfortable managing risk, but of course I also have that curiosity, and so I think starting a new company is, and particularly in the life science, it's very having natural curiosity is really key. So I think those are a couple core.
Jeffrey,
characteristics.
You have a question?
Andrew, how is Life Sciences PA? We're here today with Chris Molyneux. How has Life Sciences PA helped Melior?
So, it's important for people to understand who aren't familiar with life science that the life science industry is such a multifaceted industry with so many different skill sets. And what LSPA brings is it's a conduit for people like me and Melior Discovery to find those relationships, those people, because even after all these years of doing it, we find ourselves with challenges where you need to find people with solutions, and LSPA provides us with that network to find those people to solve these problems.
And Andrew, what's the website address for Melior Discoveries?
It's meliordiscovery.com, MELIOR discovery.com.
We've been speaking with Andrew Reaume, who is the CEO of Melior Discoveries, here on Executive Leaders Radio. Don't forget to visit our website. It's executiveleadersradio.com to learn more about our executive leaders. It's executiveleadersradio.com. To learn more about our executive leaders, we'll be back in a moment right after this break. Don't go away. You now can recognize your deserving business advisors on our nation's leading Business with Heart radio show, executiveleadersradio.com. Yes, you can recognize your deserving business advisors on our nation's leading Business with Heart radio show, executiveleadersradio.com. Simply visit executiveleadersradio.com, securely enter their info, and we'll reach out to spotlight your deserving business advisors on our nation's leading Business with Heart radio show, executiveleadersradio.com. Don't wait. This radio and online social media and search engine exposure is quite valuable to your advisors. Yes, this radio and online social media exposure is free and quite valuable to your business advisors who deserve to be recognized. Visit executiveleadersradio.com now to nominate your deserving business advisors. Back. You're listening to Executive Leaders Radio. This is your host, Herb Cohen. We'd like to introduce John Witkowski, president of DSM Biomedical. John, what is DSM Biomedical?
DSM Biomedical, we are biomaterials experts. We create unique solutions for people in the orthopedic, cardiovascular, and drug delivery markets.
Ooh. Where are you from originally? How many brothers and sisters? And where are you in the pecking order?
I grew up in the suburbs of Manhattan in a town called Spring Valley, New York, and I come from a family of 6. I'm the last of 6 kids. We're like the Brady Bunch, three boys, 3 girls.
Mm-hmm. Jeffrey?
What was Spring Valley like, John, growing up? What were some of the characteristics of your neighborhood?
Yeah, Spring Valley was really like a blue-collar town in the outskirts of the area. Like everyone in our neighborhood all had different roles, plumbers, different things. You know, my father was in food service, so like a salt-of-the-earth area.
You mentioned your father and what he did for a living, and also your grandfather and their experience. How did your relationship with your dad influence your career?
My father was super resilient. At the age of 9, he was walking across Europe out of Poland to escape, the persecution from World War II. And he ended up here in the States. He did some military service and then ended up in food service.
Did you ever go to work with your dad?
I did, and it was amazing. As a young kid going in there, it was a 2,000-person cafeteria, and it was a massive operation, a lot of processing going on. They had automation, a lot of different things.
What did you learn from that experience?
I learned things were process and how to organize stuff, and also, there was formulas and different ways to do things. It was pretty interesting.
Chris?
John, that sounds a lot like the med tech industry. Do you think that was in your blood or just what you learned from your father? The constant change, the constant innovation, and constant creativity and adaptability. It sounds like you took that from him to where you are today.
Yes, absolutely. And that's what's necessary in our field. You constantly are trying to innovate your way around different solutions in the market, trying to heal people, finding better ways to do it, healthcare economics.
Mm-hmm. Drew?
Yeah, John, I was just curious if when you were growing up, it was a pretty large family. Did you guys sit down for dinner together?
Yeah, that was a big thing for us. We were all sitting around the dinner table, and a lot of emphasis was on our education. We were always being asked how we're doing in school, and you definitely did not want to be doing poorly in school. It didn't go well for you.
And what was the impact of those conversations on DSM?
For me, education is a huge part of doing things. And DSM being a biomaterials company, there's a lot of emphasis on R&D and research and education, and it fits hand in hand.
Mm-hmm. Matthew?
Yeah, sticking with your family, John, you said not just are you the youngest in your Brady Bunch, but you are the youngest by 7 years. Tell us a little bit about that, what it meant to be younger by 7 years than the rest of the siblings.
Well, the first thing it meant was that my parents kept going until they got it right. That's what I tell my siblings. So after that, it was a big driver for me. Being the youngest, I always was striving to keep up with my other siblings, and they were much older than me. So it really put a drive in me, a competitive drive.
You said you wanted to participate in stuff that we're doing. Like, what did you want to participate in?
Well, they were always going out, having fun, going to games, doing events. I was always, you got to go to bed. You're too young. So it was really a driver to, just be a part and run with the pack.
And what's that got to do with running a business, that wanting to be the older kid, wanting to participate?
Well, it creates that drive in you. Like you always want to do more and better, and you want to be successful, and you want to keep going. We're a team-based business, but we try to, there's always that competitive nature. You got to do better than the next business out there. There's a lot of competition.
Shannon?
John, in the green room, you mentioned that you played a number of sports growing up, and in particular, you really enjoyed team sports. What does that tell us about you?
One of the things I really enjoyed basketball because you both get the element of individual contribution. So, you have to do well as an individual and do your part on the team, but you win together. And that's kind of what I bring into DSM.
Tell us more about that. What do you mean?
That means each person in my group has to do their best, each function, from innovation to quality to operations and marketing and sales. Individually, they got to do their best, but we work cohesively as a team to bring the entire package together for a successful business.
Mr. Riley?
You mentioned that drive that you have, John, since you were a young kid. When was the first time that you started making money?
I was 12 years old and had to get a paper route. My family did not come with a lot of money, and in order to get the equipment to do sports, whether it was baseballs or other things, I had to have a source of income. So I took it upon myself to get a paper route.
And that paper route, how did that change as you did the job or as you got older?
I tend to always think of things as a process. So even in the paper route, it was, what's the fastest way I could get it done? Which was the right path through the neighborhood and things like that.
And how do you bring that forward to what you do today at DSM?
Well, everything's a process. And, even innovation, the way you go about it, the way we produce product, the way we do things, it's all process oriented. So bringing that type of thinking is very important in the business world.
Excellent. Matthew?
Yeah, John, your dad's an immigrant from Poland, and you told us in the green room your mom came over from Italy. How does being the youngest son of two immigrants impact you?
Well, number one, I'm like a multi-relator. So, I'm comfortable being with the folks on the floor where we're making product as well as sitting in the boardroom. I mean, that's came from my upbringing.
And you've also talked a little bit about education and the way that your parents cared about education. Is that related?
Yeah, they were a big emphasis. They always wanted us to do better than they did. So they were always seeking to, give us as much opportunity as they could. They worked really hard so that we would have a better life.
Mr. Hanlon?
John, I wanted to go back to this competitive spirit you mentioned and just understand the influence that competitive spirit has on your company and for your clients.
Yeah, well, we're always setting the bar high. And that comes as the nature of the business we are. And every year the numbers go up. Every year it happens. And I want to not just hit the numbers. I want to exceed the numbers. I've always wanted us to do as best as we can.
And how has that spirit helped you grow this business to the size it is today? Yeah,
well, I tell you, last year, when you think of COVID and the impact it had on the elective surgery market, my business still grew. We grew slightly. We still grew 1.5%. We grew the bottom line as well. And by all means, we probably shouldn't have because our customers didn't grow like as much as they should have.
Yeah, earlier you mentioned that you wanted to win, you didn't want to lose, but you didn't want to win at all costs. What's that all about?
Look at the space we're in. We're in the medical space. You cannot be in this business if you don't have morals and ethics. You cannot cut corners. You have got to do it right. And you just think there's people at the end of everything we do. You got to keep that in mind.
Mr. Molyneux, what other question you got?
I just think about the medtech industry, and you're right, John, about the attributes of a good medtech company, but the constant change. It's not like a pharma company where you develop a product and you market that product. In medtech, you're constantly evolving. Why are you successful in that?
Well, we listen to our customers. We're out.
John, why are you personally successful?
It just comes from that resilience. I've gotten that from my upbringing, from my parents. I used to see my father spend 3 hours outside trying to fix a lawnmower. We're in a throwaway society now. It wasn't like that then. And I just found I have the same spirit. You got to keep going till you solve that problem, till you fix it. And there's always an answer. I always believe there is an answer.
What's the immigrant parent? What do the immigrant parents have to do with there's always an answer?
They had to find their way through society. I mean, they didn't have anything. They had to make do with what they had. And by the way, they provided for 6 kids. It's an amazing feat. considering they didn't have college education and they both worked very hard, both held jobs. It's very inspiring. And I
sounds to me like you see people for who they are. It's not a matter of how much money somebody making or whatever. You're seeing people for who they are, aren't you?
Absolutely. In your background, you all come in an equal playing field. It doesn't matter where you come from.
Jeffrey?
John, you mentioned earlier that you grew up in a diverse, multicultural environment. How does that translate into running a company of 300 people?
I mean, it's been a huge blessing to me. I mean, I grew up with even in my elementary school. I mean, we had nationalities all over the place because I grew up in New York, and it's suited me perfectly for this company. We're an international company. I've got employees all over the world, in the Netherlands, in Asia, here in the U.S., and it's really helped us knit together and have an appreciation for different backgrounds.
What's the benefit Life Sciences PA has brought to your organization?
I mean, I think of PA Life Sciences threefold. One, from a political standpoint, they help look after our needs in the government. Two, from a business standpoint and networking, we're connected with a lot of companies in our industry. And three, it helps give us an opportunity to give back. We can work and help other people that might be struggling. And I get that through PA Life Sciences.
So it sounds to me like PA Life Sciences is like an umbrella organization helping bring a lot of different stuff to the life science industry in the region.
Absolutely. There's been hubs in Boston and in California. And I think through PA Life Sciences, we're creating an innovation hub here in PA.
Website for DSM Biomedical?
You just go to dsm.com and you'll find a biomedical link in there.
We've been speaking with John Witkowski, president of DSM Biomedical, here on Executive Leaders Radio. Stick around. We'll be back in a moment right after this quick break. Back. You're listening to Executive Leaders Radio. This is your host, Herb Cohen. We'd like to introduce Jeff Aronin, founder, chairman, and CEO of Paragon Biosciences. Jeff, what is Paragon Biosciences?
Paragon's a life science innovator. We invest, build biotech companies. We have 8 companies across the country at this time.
And where you're from originally, and how many brothers and sisters? Where are you in the pecking order?
Moved a couple times, but primarily from Chicago.
Mm-hmm. And how many brothers and sisters? Where are you in the pecking order there?
3 brothers, and I'm the oldest.
All righty. And how young were you when you started investing?
Early on, I invested in my own companies by the age of 12. At 10, I started cutting lawns and shoveling snow. And by 12, I had a dozen kids in the neighborhood working with me, building those companies and taking care of our neighborhood.
Who bought the lawnmowers?
I learned early on that not all my, some of the older neighbors or some of the people didn't have lawnmowers or they weren't quite as good. So I went out and invested in a couple lawnmowers, invested in buying shovels so we could cut more lawns faster and shovel more driveways.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you got the investing and the entrepreneurial thing at a young age, 10 and 12. There it is. Not many kids do that. Jeffrey.
So, Jeff, growing up, tell us about mom and dad. What did they do?
They were educators. They were teachers, and they taught us the importance of getting a good education and working hard at school, making sure you do well.
And how did growing up with teachers, I think you mentioned that education is something nobody can take away from you. What is the value of education in your professional life?
It gives you a platform to build off of. And even though a lot of the things you don't learn, may not use all the time, but the ability to learn how to think, be critical thinking is so important in life, making decisions all the time.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Molyneux.
Hey, Jeff, investing in the life sciences is a long way away from snow shovels and lawnmowers. I mean, I think the life sciences got to be the most high-risk industry to invest in. Couldn't you have picked something a little less risky?
Well, I think there's a lot of similarities as well, Chris. There's certainly risk, but there's you're solving important needs for people. Well, when you're cutting people's lawns, you're helping them get out of their driveway when it snows. so they can get to work. And when you're developing medicine, you're helping people as well.
Drew?
Jeff, I'm just curious where the drive to build a business at 10 years old came from.
I don't know exactly where it came from, but certainly the idea of being able to work hard, get rewarded for it, be able to do something for others, and at the same time be able to surround yourself with your friends, and you're all doing something, accomplishing it.
Yeah, Jeff, you mentioned helping people as well. I'm just curious where that comes from, the desire to help others.
As an older brother, I think it was always important. We all take care of each other, take care of your family, your friends. But I also think the key to any business, anything we do in life, is really solving a problem, helping people solve a need. And that's what we're doing today as we develop medicines for people as well.
Matthew?
Yeah, Jeff, when I asked you in the green room about mistakes made and lessons learned by a guy who's been running his business since he was 10 years old, you told me something about over-leveraging baseball cards. What happened?
I think we made a lot of mistakes. Anytime you build a company, the more you do, the more mistakes you make and the more you learn. And I do remember we would cut lawns, and our reward was we'd all get together afterwards, get food and trade baseball cards. And sometimes those trades didn't always work out. And sometimes I owed my employees more than we made that week.
Shannon?
Jeff, in the green room, you mentioned your mom, and you told us a little bit about her personality growing up. Can you tell us more about that?
My mother is gregarious. She loves life, and it really taught me that you got to enjoy the journey. There's a lot of ups and downs, and if you have to have the right attitude as you're going into it, because otherwise it's not worth it. You really got to enjoy it all, enjoy the journey. And that was really helpful for me, not just success and being happy at the end, but all the way through, and taking things out of that really, really helped.
Pat?
Jeff, you mentioned that you had two younger brothers. What was your relationship with them growing up?
Just great. Look, it's great to have people in the world that have your back and you have theirs, and looking out for each other. And those early jobs, those were two of my first employees, and I'm lucky enough one of my brothers still works with me. So really great relationship.
Having your brothers work with you, how does that impact how you build your team today?
Well, I think it's important that you set fair standards for everybody. And that was important to me. I teach my kids that work with me at times, and my all family members, you got to do the hardest job, and you got to be that much more successful than anybody. And at the same time, you got to set fair standards that everybody, friends, every employee lives up to.
Chris?
Jeff, from Chicago, Cubs or White Sox?
Chris, I'm a North Sider. I'm a Cub fan, although I love baseball. I love both teams, but I'm a Cub fan.
And I thought you might say Cubs, and I got to believe there's some resilience of being a Cubs fan that also translates into being an investor in the life sciences, where there are a lot of failures. Can you tie those two together?
Well, you know what? You're exactly right. Being a Cub fan is a very difficult team to love. We've had some ups, we've had a lot of downs and a few ups recently, which have been great. But like investing in biotech companies, you have to stick with it. You have to have continuity. And eventually, like we did a few years back, you'll get some big victories.
Jeff?
Jeff, you're creating drugs that have cures that impact not only the patient, but the rest of the family. Tell us an early experience when you observed, and it was an eye-opener, that you observed a drug. I think you mentioned a 13-year-old girl when you were at Carter Wallace. Tell us about an early eye-opening experience where you observed a drug and how it impacted the patient and the family.
Wow. Jeff, I spent the day working with a physician, and I met a patient who brought her whole family in and watched. This is when it turned from a job to a life career for me, is when I saw that it wasn't just the patient, it was entire family of 18 people showed up at the office, and I've never seen anything like it. The emotion, how important this disease was to that family and this child, and this drug that we were giving them meant she didn't have to have a surgery. And that changed my life and really made this something I never wanted to not do. Mm-hmm. And it sticks with me every day.
Mm-hmm. What are you most proud of, Jeff?
You know, I am so proud of the teams that we have at Paragon and our companies that we build and the work we do in helping others. I'm so excited when we get a product approved and seeing the impact it makes on lives. And, you know, we get 1 to 2 drugs a year approved, and it is so rewarding when that happens.
Mm-hmm. Shannon?
Jeff, in the green room, you mentioned that you did some pole vaulting when you were younger. Why pole vaulting? Tell us more. Why did you enjoy it?
You know, I did all kinds of sports. That's what we did growing up. And pole vaulting was something I really liked. And, you know, it was one that I wasn't as good as everybody at. It was very competitive to play football and basketball. But I could be, you know, not as many people wanted to take the risk of pole vaulting. So I could be the best at that. And it was very technical, which I like, and I still like technical things. It was a lot of fun, and I still look back on those days.
Mm-hmm. So you have a technical side and an investing side. I guess that helps explain what you're doing for a living and why you're enjoying it. What's the website address for this organization known as Paragon Biosciences? It's
ParagonBiosci.com.
Let me have that one more time.
Paragon, BIOSCI. ParagonBiosci.com.
ParagonBiosci.com. We've been speaking with Jeff Aronin, founder, chairman, and CEO of Paragon Biosciences here on Executive Leaders Radio. And this is a show that's pulled together by Chris Molyneux and Life Sciences PA. Don't forget to visit our website, executiveleadersradio.com. That's executiveleadersradio.com. To learn more about our executive leaders, we'll be back in a moment right after this quick break.
Recognize your deserving business advisors on our nation's leading Business with Heart radio show, Executive Leaders Radio. Yes, you can recognize your deserving business advisors on our nation's leading Business with Heart radio show, executiveleadersradio.com. Simply visit executiveleadersradio.com, securely enter their info, and we'll reach out to spotlight your deserving business advisors on our nation's leading Business with Heart radio show, executiveleadersradio.com. Don't wait. This radio and online social media and search engine exposure is quite valuable. Yes, this radio and online social media and search engine exposure is quite valuable to your business advisors who deserve to be recognized. Visit executiveleadersradio.com now to nominate your deserving business advisors for free exposure.
Back. You're listening to Executive Leaders Radio. This is your host, Herb Cohen. We'd like to introduce Craig Fraser, President and CEO of Windtree Therapeutics. What is Windtree Therapeutics, Craig?
Yes, we're a development stage. We're developing drugs for, and we're a small public company here in this area. We're developing drugs for people with acute cardiovascular and pulmonary conditions that are in the hospital, facing moments of crisis.
And how many brothers and sisters do you have? Were you in the pecking order?
Yeah, I'm actually an only child.
An only child. And where you're from originally?
All over Pennsylvania.
Now, how many different schools did you go to prior to graduating high school?
11.
11 different schools.
We moved a lot.
And you mentioned you were brought up by a single mom. And I'm wondering, moving to 11 different schools when you were a kid, and also being an only child, having to go into those environments alone without a sibling, that must have been pretty difficult.
I guess there was times when I was a kid that you could find that difficult, but I did learn to rely on myself a bit and be a bit independent, obviously, but also how to adapt and the importance of building quick new relationships wherever you went.
What's the benefit of your building quick new relationships to building this business, which is a public company?
Well, it's benefited me throughout my career, obviously from everything that I've done in sales or investor relations, but it's all about people and the relationships that you build, not only within your own company, but externally.
So you learned that lesson as a young kid moving to 11 different schools, huh, Jeffrey?
Yeah, I learned it, and it was constantly reinforced. And those skills, I guess if you can call them that, sharpened, what works and what doesn't work.
Gotcha, Jeff.
Greg, growing up with a single mom, we talked a little bit in the green room about your grandfather. Tell us about your grandfather and the time you spent with him and how that influenced you.
Yeah, not having a father around, and when you think in those junior high years as a kid during those very formative years, I happened to be in the location where my grandfather was in that 8th and 9th grade period, and he became a really important part of my life at a really important time to have that male figure around and learn from him.
And did he actually influence you to join the Marines?
He did. He was a World War II, landed on the beaches at Normandy, Silver Star winner, that really great generation, and listening and working with him.
Chris?
Yeah.
Craig, what do you think were some of the attributes your grandfather wanted to instill in you? And what do you think he would think of you today?
Yeah, that's a great question. That generation was self-reliant. They were patriotic, get the job done. And I'm sure that's reasons why at 17, I was in the Marine Corps, later on as an Army officer. I hope and I believe that my grandfather would be proud of how I've lived my life and what I'm doing today.
Drew?
Craig, I wanted to go back to your mom. Sounds like she was a fighter and a survivor. What did you learn from Mom?
Yeah, she, that there's always a way. I think you used the right words, survivor, and, no matter what the situation or the condition, she would adapt, and that there would always be a way, to get food on the table. We were very low income, and get on with things.
And when you're faced with a tough decision at Windtree, what do you hear your mom whispering in your ear?
There's always a way. Yeah, I kind of go back. To that, and regardless of the barrier you can problem solve, and which is probably the most important.
Matthew?
Yeah, Craig, what were you doing for fun when you were a kid?
I did a little bit of sports, cross country running and basketball, but for a couple of years there, I had a friend who had dirt bikes and motocross, and being out on the motorcycles, I just fell in love with that. And then
what did you fall in love with about that?
Exciting, the speed of it. The kind of get on a dirt bike and just kind of attack, the course, if you will.
Do you still ride?
I do. I actually still have a couple. I don't ride like that anymore.
I'm curious what you think about when you ride and what that's got to do with you as the boss of this company.
Riding now at this age on a bigger motorcycle, rumbling up these Bucks County country roads is therapeutic. It's both, focusing and clearing the mind, but at the same time, so relaxing. And I think it can really add a focus and a clarity, even if you are thinking about work sometimes as you're rumbling up the road.
Shannon.
Greg, you mentioned you went to 11 different schools before graduating high school. I'm curious, what was the hardest move for you, and what did you learn from that?
Yeah, I think there was one change in particular that in the junior high timeframe where I went to a new school and I quickly jumped in to make friends with the wrong crowd, that wasn't well thought of, that were bad. And, what I learned the next time was choose your friends wisely, pay attention to how different people are, and build the right relationships with the right people.
And how does that relate to the way you're building your team nowadays?
Oh, well, it really makes me pay attention to people and people dynamics and motives, frankly, of people. And I think it's that understanding can help you make connections and make the right connections that are mutually beneficial.
Pat?
Craig, you mentioned that you used to race motorcycles when you were younger, but you also mentioned in the green room that you ran cross country. Pretty different mindset for those two activities. Can you tell me what you liked about cross country?
Yeah, there is a bit of a team sport to it, not quite like basketball was or what have you, but the idea of getting out and running some distance, trying to beat your own time and the focus of that and that zone that you get into, I think there is some relationship there.
Mm-hmm. And Chris?
Yeah, Craig, do you have children of your own?
I do. I have two great grown kids now. I guess you never stop calling them kids. But.
Right. And how has your childhood affected the way you operate as a father? And let me ask two questions. What have you learned from your children?
Oh, that's a great question. Let me answer the first part. So, when I became a father and we try to run you're running these careers and there's career opportunities or changes and buyouts and companies being bought. I was really determined as a father, frankly, to give my kids a foundation and stay in one place and go with the same set of friends up through school and not compromise that and not compromise not being there and being involved for them and all their activities. And sometimes that could take a lot of work, right? As much as our jobs and so forth. But I think that was something that really cemented that in me or gave me that fire for that. Mm-hmm. And, I guess really love from your kids and the sense of family and how connected we are, even with grown kids, talking every day or every other day, that sense of connection.
Jeffrey?
So, Craig, how do you see Pennsylvania as a place to build a life sciences company? And how do you perceive what value has Life Sciences PA brought to Windtree?
Yeah, look, I think we are the very, very best place to start and grow innovation in life sciences. And it's PA or Life Sciences PA has been phenomenal to connect this community. We have fantastic universities that are the bastion of innovation, like Penn and the entire collection there. We're working in a collective community. And by the way, no matter what your stage is, if your stage is early, science and innovation, we have that. But if you get all the way through to commercialization, because this is the original corridor for pharmaceuticals, we have such a collection of talent, not just on the early science side, but if you have to go out and commercialize, we have the best sales and marketing and all of those people. So I think I'm loving seeing the growth that we have in this region for life sciences.
Craig, what's the website address for Windtree Therapeutics?
It's WindtreeTX.com.
How do you spell that?
WINDTREETX.com.
We've been speaking with Craig Fraser, President and CEO of Windtree Therapeutics here on Executive Leaders Radio. Jeff, can you give us a rundown of who else we've had on the show today, please?
We had a great show. Thanks, Chris, for hosting us at Life Sciences PA. We had Andrew Reaume, CEO, Melior Discoveries, John Witkowski, President, DSM Biomedical, Jeff Aronin, Founder, Chairman, and CEO of Paragon Biosciences, and Craig Fraser, President and CEO of Windtree Therapeutics.
I'd like to thank my co-hosts, including Jeff Mack and Shannon Lane, Newmark Knight Frank, as well as Drew Hanlon, Pat Riley, USI, Matthew Shapiro, Obermeyer, and Chris Molyneux, Life Sciences, Pennsylvania, for giving me a hand structuring the questions, hopefully helping our listening audience, providing our listening audience an educational and entertaining show. Don't forget to visit our website, executiveleadersradio.com, to learn more about our executive leaders. Thank you for joining us today, and have a nice day. Bye-bye.